And Republicans on the Senate Finance Committee are unveiling proposed changes to President Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill. Those changes to Medicaid, tax cuts, and the debt limit could set up a potential clash with House Republicans. ABC News Washington managing editor Catherine Faulders has the details for us. Hi, Catherine. So what are some of the biggest changes they're making here to this mega bill, and how do you think this is going to go over in the House?
Yeah, it's a good question. And as you note, it does set up a potential clash with the House and also with the White House. There are a bunch of changes here. For example, the Senate version makes tax cuts permanent, whereas if you look at the House version, that sunsets them. You're also dealing with differences in the Senate as it relates to changes to the provider tax Medicaid provisions. That drops that percentage from 6 to 3.5%. SALT, we've talked a lot about those. For example, the debt hike limit, the debt limit hike in the Senate bill is $5 trillion as opposed to $6 trillion. And the reality here is that they are making a lot of changes in the Senate side, and it will set up a clash with the House, for example, and even with the White House, as Trump obviously has endorsed that House-backed plan that's gone over to the Senate. We expected this. It could potentially ping-pong back and forth, but the reality is John Thune and the Senate side is dealing with a very slim majority, so it is going to be a pretty tough and tricky path ahead for him to get this passed through the Senate.
And Majority Leader John Thune could only afford to lose 3 Republican senators to get this bill passed. How much support does this version have?
Well, it's a good question, because after this version from the Senate Finance Committee was released, you did see some senators come out against this, for example. Obviously, Thune is confident they can get this thing over the line, but as usual, it will be tricky for him with this margin. For example, Senator Ron Johnson said he's a no right now because the cuts aren't steep enough. We've talked a lot about Rand Paul. Rand Paul likely won't support this bill because it includes a debt limit hike. Rick Scott, he's another one. So, again, the margin is very, very small here. So John Thune does have a lot of work to do behind the scenes to see if he can get his members on board.
And, Catherine, the Trump family's new Trump-branded smartphone is raising ethical and constitutional questions. What are lawmakers saying about that?
Yeah, look, we've heard from some Democrats who have said this is a conflict of interest. We know that the Trump family insists that it's not, for example, that there's no conflicts of interest, and that the White House says President Trump's assets are in a trust that's managed by his children. Now, this is all very interesting because in the meantime, the Senate is actually expected to vote today on a crypto bill that would directly benefit companies with ties to President Trump and his children. So I can imagine you will still be hearing a lot from lawmakers about this today, Diane.
All right, ABC News Washington Bureau Managing Editor Catherine Faulders. Catherine, thank you.